having you this morning, and great to be with you. You say, where do I live? We live in outside of Austin, Texas, so don't hold that against us. We don't actually live in Austin, but we live on the north side of the lake, and it's a privilege to be able to serve you all this weekend, and I'll also be here next weekend with you, and I'm here with my family. I think we have a picture, so there they are. You'll see them in the lobby possibly, but we got 3 little ones. My oldest there is Trip, and then my beautiful daughter Scout, and then our surprise. I don't know if you guys have had one of those. At wife 42, it's a surprise, and that's our little one River. And so it is great to be with you. We hope we get to meet you. I was going to say the lobby, the cafe. I don't know where I'm at. All I know is this thing goes in a circle. So we'll be out there somewhere, and love to meet you. But it's great to be able to continue this series on It's About Time. And what we've been learning over the last couple of weeks is that when it comes to time, it's not something we can buy. It's not something we can create. We can't purchase it. We have a very finite aspect when it comes to time. And the hard part about time that I've come to realize is we actually don't control time. We all have the same amount of time in a day, but when it comes to our life, we don't actually control how much time we're going to have. Only God controls that. In fact, God has the numbers of days. He's already counted the numbers of days that each of us are going to live. And so it's kind of a difficult thing. That's why Psalms 90 tells us that we are to teach ourselves to number our days, meaning that we are to use our time to the best that we possibly can. We're supposed to leverage it with priorities, but leverage it for the kingdom of Jesus Christ. And what happens when it comes to time is that there are times in our life where it feels like that we go through challenges, we go through problems, we go through maybe a crisis, and what happens is that we think that as we're going through that challenge, we think to ourselves, what a waste of time. I mean, I only have so much time to live, and here I am in the middle of a challenge or a negative circumstance, and it feels like as if we're just wasting that time. And what we really long for is to get on the other side of that problem so we can all say, as you have said before, man, it's about time that's over with. It's about time that's over with. Well, what I want to challenge us with this morning is as we look at problems that we recognize that it's actually not a waste of time. And that as we look at our problems in our life and the challenges that come our way and the circumstances that come our way, that not only is it not a waste of our time, but in the middle of these problems, we can actually experience some joy. We can actually experience joy. And so we're going to use Philippians chapter 1 to do that. So if you have a Bible, I encourage you to open it up. If you have a phone, a smartphone, you can use your smartphone, go to Philippians chapter 1, or you use the YouVersion app, and you can follow us along with taking some notes. But we're going to look at Philippians chapter 1. Now let's understand the book of Philippians. This was a letter that the Apostle Paul wrote to the church of Philippi. Now he wrote this letter, and it was written while he was in prison in Rome. And he's writing this letter specifically to this church. Now, this church of Philippi, he actually founded this church on his second missionary journey. Acts chapter 16 tells us that while the Apostle Paul was in the city of Troas, that he had a vision to come to Macedonia. And so he followed the Lord and the vision over into Macedonia, and there he established this church of Philippi. He was only there for 3 months. During his third missionary journey, he made a quick stop in just to check in, see how things were going. And in this particular moment, he's writing a letter to this church, to these believers in Philippi, and he's doing this for a few reasons. Number one, he wants to update them on his status. So he's doing a status update. This is what's going on in my life. Secondly, he wants to inform them that their servant, their friend Epaphroditus, who you're going to find in the book of Philippians, is okay. You see, this church of Philippians, they were always supplying the Apostle Paul when he had need. In fact, the New Testament tells us that they were the most generous of all the churches when it came to when the Apostle Paul had some sort of physical need, that they would supply his needs. And so Epaphroditus was given the supply to give to go up into Rome and hand that to the Apostle Paul to supply his needs. Now, he was there for a while and never came back, and I think the church of Philippi thought, oh my goodness, what happened to Epaphroditus? Like, the guy took everything that we gave him and he flew the coop. I mean, he's gone. He stole everything. And so the Apostle Paul is writing them saying, no, Epaphroditus is fine. In fact, He served me well. He delivered the goods that you sent, and he almost lost his life in doing so. So he was a servant of the church of Philippi and a servant of Jesus Christ, and he served him well. So he's letting him know Epaphroditus is okay. But he also wants them to know, mainly, as you look through the theme of the book of Philippians, this letter, Paul is going to continually talk about joy. He's going to say that we have to fight for joy. We have to live for joy. That we have to live in joy. We have to rejoice in the Lord always. That's the overarching theme of the book of Philippians. And so the Apostle Paul is writing this, and he's talking about joy. And the thing about our culture is joy is a very tricky thing. I mean, it's very tricky. To be able to experience joy or to attain joy, it seems like a very difficult task. And then the moment that we think we have joy, as quick as we found it, we think that we've lost it. We can't really hold on to it. Because joy for us in our culture today is mainly based upon our outward circumstances. The circumstances that we find ourselves in is what makes up our joy. Now, all of us, according to psychology, live with what we call an optimistic bias. And what an optimistic bias is, it means that we believe tomorrow is going to be better than our today. We believe that our future is going to be better than our present. And so we have this hope that our future is going to be better than our present. And so this hope kind of gives us a little bit of joy or a little bit of happiness. But the question is, what if you actually get to tomorrow and it's worse than your today? What happens? Emotional researchers actually call this the hedonic treadmill. And basically what that states is that we are all looking to attain something. Maybe it is to push forward and attain and be successful in some sort of goal. And once we reach that goal or we attain that thing that we're chasing after, that actually what it's going to do is going to provide us with joy. So the way that plays out is if I can just get that promotion, then I'll finally be happy. If I can just get that perfect relationship, then I'll finally be happy. If I can accumulate more wealth, then we'll finally be happy. So what happens when you actually get that promotion, you find that relationship, or you accumulate more wealth, and the happiness still isn't there? What we recognize is that there is a joy that can be had by each one of us, even in the middle of challenges and problems, that we can have that aren't based on our external circumstances. Now, some of our circumstances and our problems, we create ourselves. Let's just be honest. I mean, I've created enough of those in my life. We create some of our problems ourselves. But there's other problems that we don't create. Maybe it's the unemployment line because you got laid off unexpectedly. Maybe it's the visit to the doctor in which he tells you that you have been diagnosed with cancer. Or maybe it's the unexpected, it's the loved one who unexpectedly dies. Like, we didn't create that. And it's these type of problems and challenges that basically get us to a place where we scratch our head and we say, God, where are you? God, like, I thought you knew what was going on. God, did you leave? God, are you even faithful? And it's these problems that become very, very difficult. But Paul's going to show us that in the middle of these problems, we can still experience joy and we can still leverage our time for the sake of the kingdom. So let's understand Paul's circumstances. He tells the church of Philippians, verse 12, he says, hey, listen, I'm giving you an update of what's going on with me. He tells them in verse 7 that they are a partner with them even in his imprisonment. So as he's writing this letter, he's sitting in Rome and he is under arrest. Now, some would say that he actually has chains and shackles on his wrist and on his ankles, and he's actually chained to a guard 24 hours a day. Because ultimately, what the Apostle Paul, the circumstance that he finds himself in, is he's on death row. He is waiting for the final judgment. Will I live or will I die? Thumbs up or thumbs down? So that is the place where the Apostle Paul is in this moment. As he's writing this letter about joy, and he's saying, rejoice always. And again, I say rejoice. As he's writing this, you can actually hear like the clanging of the chains as he's writing. I mean, it doesn't seem like a very joyful circumstance to me, yet Paul is saying that we can have joy. Now, not only that, but this is the fourth of the what we call the prison epistles in the New Testament. This is a prison epistle that the Apostle Paul wrote. This is towards the end of his writing, so 61, 62 AD. prior to this, he had already written the church of Corinth, which is where we get the books of 1st and 2nd Corinthians. And remember what he said in 1 Corinthians in chapter 11? Remember when he talked about his circumstances in 2 Corinthians? He said, I've endured far greater labors, far more imprisonment, with countless beatings and often near death. 5 times I received at the hands of the Jews the 40 lashes less than one. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. A night and a day I was adrift at sea, on frequent journeys, in danger from rivers, danger from robbers, dangers from my own people, dangers from the Gentiles, dangers in the city, dangers in the wilderness, dangers at sea, dangers from false brothers, in toil and hardship, through many sleepless nights, and hunger and thirst, often without food, in cold and exposure. And apart from all this, I had the daily pressure and anxiety of all the churches. So the Apostle Paul is talking about the trials and persecution and problems that he's faced. Now that was even earlier, but now he's in Rome in prison, waiting the death penalty. And so we have to kind of sit back and understand his circumstances, and yet he's going to attest that even in the middle of all this, there can still be joy, and we can still leverage our time for the sake of the gospel. We can still leverage our time in a significant way. Now, the church of Philippians, they were also going through suffering. The commentary, Frank Thielman, in his commentary of the book of Philippians, he says this. He says, the Philippians are enduring hardship for the sake of the gospel. They're suffering political persecution and experiencing anxiety about others who are also suffering for the same reason. And so they too are experiencing suffering and anxiety, and they too are going through problems. Yet in all this, Paul is going to say, rejoice. Rejoice. So what's the secret here? See, this is one thing I know that's true about all of us in this room. We have something in common. Either number one, you just got finished going through a crisis and a problem in a difficult time in your life. Number two, you're right in the middle of a difficult time and a problem in your life. Or number three, we're about to get another one coming down the way, right? And that's true for all of us. So how do we respond? How do we respond in such a way where we don't feel like we're wasting the small amount of time that we do have here on earth? How do we respond so that we know that we're leveraging our time for the sake of the kingdom, but we're also experiencing joy? Well, let's see what the Apostle Paul says. The Apostle Paul is going to tell us that we can find a joyful purpose in the middle of our problems. How does he do that? Well, number one, Paul actually recognized who was in charge. Philippians chapter 1, verse 18 and 19, Paul writes, yes, and I will rejoice, for I know that through your prayers and the help of the Spirit of Jesus Christ, this will turn out for my deliverance. This will turn out for my deliverance. The Apostle Paul had a conviction that whether it was in prison, thirsty, hungry, shipwrecked, being beaten, he understood that ultimately God was in control. God was in charge and God was in control. He understood that. He had this conviction that God is completely sovereign, that God is completely good. And yes, God is sovereign, but this is also what we know about God, that even though He is sovereign, He is also faithful, He is also loving, He is also working for our good and for our benefit, and always working for His glory. So even in the middle of our troubles, Paul is saying that I'm recognizing that God is in charge here. And so if God is in charge here, what do I have to worry about? Though I can't make sense of it all, God is still in charge. And for us to experience joy in the middle of our trials and our problems and our struggles, what we also have to recognize is who is in control. And when we do this, it actually enables us to submit to difficulties with joy. It enables us to submit with difficulties with joy. Look what Paul writes in Philippians chapter 1, verse 6. He says this to the church of Philippi. He says, and I am sure of this, that he who began a good work in you will bring it to completion at the day of Jesus Christ. Paul is saying, I am confident that whatever work God has started in your life, He will be faithful to complete it. Now, a lot of times we like to take this passage and put it in our discipleship textbook and say that this is about our spiritual formation, that when you came to Jesus, He's going to be faithful in maturing you to into a mature Christ follower, and that is true. But I will also say the promise here that we have in Scripture is that whatever God is doing in our life, He will be faithful to complete it. He'll be faithful to complete it. We just bought this new house, and we've done, my wife and I, we've done something that we've never done in 18 years, which is we actually bought a fixer-upper. Now, the irony in all of this is I don't own a tool, not one, all right? I own no tools. And so we're supposed to be fixing it up, but I don't have tools. And so kind of the joke's on me on this. But I've learned, I've Googled, I've YouTubed, and I've figured some things out, and I've messed up a lot of things. But it's been somewhat of a fun project, maybe. And the other night, my wife is walking through the house, and she's looking at all the projects, okay? We've done the kitchen. We've done a whole bunch of work. And I have done a lot of work along with some other people. But, she's walking through the house, and she says to me, she goes, when are you going to fix this? When are you going to finish that? When are you going to finish this? And she's pointing out all the things I need to finish. And she says to me, it's almost as if you do 80% of the job and you never actually complete it. And I looked at her, I said, baby, listen, 80% got me through high school, and it got me through college, and it got me through graduate school. I think I'm good with 80%, right? I said, if you wanted 100% completion, you should have hired God to do your renovation project, not this guy. And the truth is, God does not stop mid-project. Whatever He's doing in your life, He does not hit pause, and He does not stop mid-project. What God does is He completes it. It's actually a promise that we have in Scripture. He who began a good work in you will be faithful to complete it, because He's ultimately in charge of every problem, every challenge, every circumstance in our life. And so for us to experience joy in the middle of our problems and to leverage our time for the kingdom, the small amount of time that we have, we lean into this promise and say, no, God is in charge of this. I can't make sense of it, but God's in charge of it. Secondly, to find a joyful purpose in the middle of our problems, what we have to understand is that Paul redefined his circumstances in light of his vision and purpose. That he redefined his circumstances in light of his vision and purpose. Paul writes to the church of Philippi, Philippians chapter 1, starting in verse 12. He says, I want you to know, brothers, that what has happened to me has really served to advance the gospel so that it has become known throughout the whole imperial guard and to all the rest that my imprisonment is for Christ. And most of my brothers, having become confident in the Lord by my imprisonment, are much more bold to speak the word without fear. Verse 20, I eagerly expect and hope that I will in no way be ashamed, but will have sufficient courage so that now, as always, Christ will be exalted in my body, whether by life or by death. Paul's vision, Paul's purpose in life was the advancement of the gospel of Jesus Christ and the glory of Jesus Christ. That was his life purpose. That was his life vision, that regardless of what circumstance I'm in, I'm focused on the vision of my life, which is the advancement of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And he says right here, even though I'm in chains, look what's happened. Even though I'm sitting as a prisoner of Rome and I have this imperial guard next to me, guess what? Who knows about Jesus now? The imperial guard. I mean, if they're chained to him for 24 hours a day, do you think Paul's in there talking about sports? Not the Apostle Paul. I mean, he's probably sharing Jesus every moment of every day that he's in there. And he's saying, because of my imprisonment, the imperial guard, the whole imperial guard has heard the gospel. But not only that, because of my imprisonment, what I found out is that other believers, other Christ followers, they've actually been emboldened. They have boldness and courage to now go out and be bold for the sake of Jesus Christ. He's saying, so even though I'm chained up here and it's a bad circumstance and it's a problem and it's a challenge, what I know is actually the vision and the purpose of my life is being lived out even outside of this jail cell. It's being lived out. He redefined his circumstance and took a perspective of, look what God is doing in the middle of this. Even though it's a problem, my purposes are actually being lived out, with or without me. God is using this for his glory. Now, we typically don't do that. That's not typically how we view our problems. That's not the perspective we usually take. As I said, we just bought this house, and so when we were moving, I did what no man has done before, which is I went up into the attic And you know those boxes that have been going from house to house to house, from attic to attic to attic, and never been opened? Maybe you don't have those boxes. If that's the case, I envy you. But we have these boxes that we've had since we've been married. And for 17, 18 years, they just keep following us around. And no one knows what's in them. So I said, you know what? I'm opening those boxes. I'm going to see what's in these boxes. So I started opening up these old boxes that were in the attic. I found all sorts of things, mainly just keepsakes. I mean, in fact, there are boxes that our parents gave us from, like, hey, here's your stuff. And you open it up, and it's like my stuff from kindergarten, like little pictures and drawings. And I'm like, no. These are keepsakes. You keep it for your sake, not my sake, right? I mean, these are yours. I don't need the piece of art I did in 5th grade. You kept it, so you keep it. But anyways, so we found a lot of that stuff. I also found a whole bunch of high school stuff. We found pictures and all sorts of things. But I came across something that the young people in this room, were about to blow your mind, all right? I mean, I'm about to blow your mind. So what I came across is this. This is called a cassette tape. Now, you can find these in museums all across the country. But this cassette tape, let me tell you, the young people, what a cassette tape is, all right? It's just because they have no idea. There used to be a time and a day where we didn't actually carry 10,000 songs in our pocket. We carried 11. And it came on a form of a cassette tape, not on a phone, not on an iPod. I mean, it was a cassette tape, and not from the cloud. It was right here. Now, this is what we listened, your mom and dad listened to music to when they were growing up. And you had to take this tape, and you had to put it in what we called a cassette player. Now, if you were successful enough to jam it into the cassette player, and I had an old 1972 Datsun pickup, so we always went round and round trying to get this thing in there. But you would finally get it in, and you could push play, and these little things would spin, and this tape would go, and you could listen to music. Now, and of course, you had to fast forward. There was no just like push a button and it goes to the next song. You had to fast forward this thing, and it would, and then you would wait for the pause. You'd be like, okay, stop. I think that's the next song. And what we would do with these tapes, though, is that we would actually make mixtapes. And I don't know if you guys remember mixtapes, but mixtapes were awesome. And what you would do, this is the today version of this would be like your playlist, young people. Like you have a playlist for, whatever, when you work out, you have a playlist for this. You have a playlist for this. And so this is like your personal playlist, and you had to make them, though. You didn't just drag and click. I mean, you actually had to put some effort into this. You had to put it in the cassette player and then wait for the radio. And as the radio was coming, you would push record and play at the same time and hope that you beat the DJ and that you would be able to record all this. And then you could push pause and wait for another cool song on. Then you would undo it. Now, mixtapes came in handy in dating relationships. One of the greatest gifts you could give a new girlfriend was the mixtape. Like Valentine's Day, and you're like, hey, baby, I didn't just get you a box of chocolates. I got you a mixtape. And you would put songs on there that would remind you of her. And you gave the mixtape prior to giving them the Letterman jacket. So you want to see, how far is my mixtape going to take me? Are we really going to solidify this thing? Is this going to be longer than 3 or 4 weeks? Okay, it is? All right, here's the mixtape. Now let's focus on the Letterman jacket. So that would be kind of the evolution of a dating relationship in high school. Anyways, long story short, I found a mixtape. And on it, it said 1989 to 1990. Oh, yeah. So I know that you probably want to know what was on this mixtape. So let's go ahead and let's listen to a few tracks, what we got, all right? Let's go with the first one.
Yo, VIP.
Yeah.
Let's kick.
Now, this song goes through multiple generations. There's some of you that are in the older generation, and your kids were listening to this song, and you remember driving in the car, and you did a little bit of a head nod. You did, but you're still looking at your son going, what is he doing? His hair's all spiked all high, and, he put his initials on his head, and he's wearing these baggy pants. Like, I get it, but everybody was rolling in their 5.0 with this thing, all right? Vanilla Ice. And young people, if you don't know that song, that could very possibly be one of the best songs you'll ever listen to, and your parents will agree with that. All right, here's another one. I don't know if you remember this one. Pump Up the Jam. All right. This song was like the ultimate party song, right? You would throw it in, and man, you would be like, yeah, pump up the jam. Now, this is perfect because all the jocks, they had the jock dances like, that was it. It was just You know, that was it. Now, some of you ladies, I guarantee tomorrow you're going to be at the gym, and on your playlist is Pump Up the Jam. You're like, I'm on mile 2, I want to go 3, I got to kick this thing into high gear, and you go, Pump Up the Jam. That's right. Pump Up the Jam. And you're just going for it. I get it. Here's another one. This is good. This had to go on the mixtape, right? This Fine Young Cannibals. It's an okay song, but it was on there. Here's another one, though. You ready for the next one? Now, this is Chicago. This is the ultimate breakup song. And everyone remember this song. Angie Yeager, freshman year, I Remember You, because of this song. All right? So, you had this. This meant you were going through a difficult time. So just remember, listen, you guys know this. Oh, gosh, I'm getting tears. So when you see me walking by, remember that? With a tear in my eye. Look away. Look away. Just look away. Don't talk to me. Just look away. I mean, that was the song. You say, what is that all about? Yeah, I just thought it'd be funny to talk to you about that. But here's the deal. When we go through challenges, when we go through problems, what typically happens, instead of redefining our problems in light of our vision and our purpose in life, you know what we do? We actually play a mixtape in our head. And that mixtape is typically lies. The mixtape for you is probably different than me, but your mixtape is, I knew it. I knew God would walk away. I knew it. I knew this problem would come up. I knew it. I knew God doesn't care. God's not here. Whatever the lies are, they go round and round and round like a mixtape. We play it over and over and over and over and over and over again to the point to where the problem has become so big and the lies that we have fed ourselves are so large that we don't see any hope. And we're in a desperate situation. And let me tell you, friend, if that happens, you truly are in a desperate situation because we're not living out these lessons that the Apostle Paul gave us. So for us, it means that we have to redefine our problems in light of our life purpose, and it will give us joy. Look what Paul says, Philippians chapter 1, 9 through 11. And it is my prayer that your love may abound more and more with knowledge and discernment, so that you may approve what is excellent, and so be pure and blameless for the day of Christ, filled with the fruits of righteousness that comes through Jesus Christ to the glory and praise of God. This isn't just a small little prayer that the Apostle Paul wrote to make them feel better. This isn't just a prayer that we can pray for each other so that we can say, hey, we're praying for you. This prayer right here, it actually reflects and it reveals God's purpose for our life. And it's a purpose of steady progression into maturity in Jesus Christ, looking towards the day of Jesus Christ. It's that Paul is praying that regardless of your problems, I pray that your love will abound. I pray that your knowledge will grow, that you'll be able to discern what is righteous and holy and pure. You could take two people, put them through the same exact problem, same variables. One person will lean into Christ, and what will happen is their love will abound. Their knowledge, their intimate knowledge, according to the Greek, the intimate knowledge with God will grow. Their discernment will grow, and they will have spiritual, righteous fruit coming from their life and joy, even in the middle of problems. You can take another person, put him in the same exact problem. And instead of leaning into Christ, they isolate away from God. Their knowledge of God, their intimate knowledge of God, actually diminishes. And when their knowledge of God diminishes, their affection for God diminishes, and their affection for others diminish. And when this happens, their discernment is questionable. You see, in the middle of our problems, God is always doing something. And I think what Paul is saying here is that in the middle of our problems, just be patient. See what God is up to, because your love will abound and your knowledge will grow and your discernment will grow. But this isn't how we typically respond. When a problem comes our way and our challenge comes our way, what we typically do is we say, God, hurry up and get this thing over with, and we anticipate once it's over. We anticipate getting through it so we can say, it's about time, rather than saying, I'm going to wait patiently and see what God wants to do. God, I can't answer all the questions, but you're in charge, right? And there's a purpose for this problem. And I believe that the purpose of this problem, it is going to have my love for you abound and my love for others grow, and my knowledge in you is going to grow. My discernment's going to grow. I will know what is pure, what is holy, what is righteous. And so I'm just going to wait. I'm not going to try to control this anymore. I'm just going to rest and wait patiently, anticipating that whatever's happening in my circumstance, you're changing this, and there's joy in that. There's joy in that. Thirdly, the Apostle Paul would say to us by lesson and by demonstration that in problems, to find joy, Paul focused his life in light of eternity. He focused his life in light of eternity. Philippians chapter 1, verse 19. He says, yes, and I will rejoice that it is my eager expectation and hope that I will not be ashamed, but that with full courage, now as always, Christ will be honored in my body, whether by life or by death. For me to live is Christ, and to die is gain. If I am to live in the flesh, that means fruitful labor for me. Yet what shall I choose? I cannot tell. I'm hard pressed between the two. My desire is to part and to be with Christ, for that is way better. But to remain in the flesh is more necessary on your account. Paul's not having suicidal tendencies here. What he's doing is he's saying, I long for eternity. I long to be with Jesus, because he knows the inheritance that waits him. He knows there's peace. He knows there's an abundance of joy. He knows that there will be face-to-face with Jesus Christ, resting in the arms of Christ. Yes, he longs for that, but he also focuses that even though I have that waiting for me, I stay. I'm staying here. I'm going to remain because it's necessary for the sake of the gospel, but yet my hope is in tomorrow. My hope of rest is tomorrow in eternity. And the same is true for us. Refocusing our life in light of eternity reminds us of the joy set before us. It reminds us of the joy set before us. Hebrews chapter 12. That we set our gaze, we set our eyes, we fix our eyes on Jesus Christ, the perfecter of our faith. The joy set before us in the middle of our problems. They're temporary. In the middle of our problems, they're difficult. I get it. But there's eternity. We keep our eyes focused on Christ. We keep our eyes focused on the sustainer and the perfecter of our faith in the person of Jesus Christ. And we focus on that and we say, there is going to be rest. He's in control, and in the middle of this, he is working out his purposes in my life so that I can live in my purposes, and I'm looking towards eternity. Now, you may be saying, Denny, that's great. I mean, great message. God bless. Maybe you're not saying great message. 80%, I'll take it. All right. Good job. But, man, I hear you, but you don't understand what's going on in my family today. You don't understand what's going on in my life today. Like, you have no idea of the challenges and problems I'm going through, and yet you're trying to tell me to lean into joy? Like, come walk in my shoes. And for those of you that just feel broken, for those of you who just feel absolutely desperate, those of you who are looking at your circumstances and you say, there is no way I can ever experience joy here. I just want to tell you, I've walked your shoes. I've been there. I mean, I've been to desperate times. Through years of major depressive disorder, to the point to where you finally just say, I'm done. And you look at your wife and you say, I am done. And it's in that moment where God, in my journey, said, all right, Are you done fighting? Are you done trying to control every circumstance? Don't you recognize I'm in charge? And it's finally when I yielded and decide to lean into Christ rather than blame God for everything. Instead, lean into Him, that what happened? My love abound. My knowledge of Him grew. My discernment grew. Pure, holy, righteous, spiritual fruit came from it. And God did a miracle. So I get it. I mean, my journey is not much different than many of you. So I'm not just giving you some Bible and saying, hey, just, this is what the good book says. I'm telling you, I've experienced it. His faithfulness and His goodness. And in the middle of the most desperate times of my life, it's almost as if He just kind of opened a little pinhole worth of joy and said, get ready. I'm going to flood you with joy. I'm going to give you joy and joy everlasting. So for those of you who are going through difficult times, He is faithful. He's in charge. He will complete His work. And you will see the spiritual fruit of it when we lean into Christ. Now, for us as a church family here at Colonial, I was walking down, I don't know where I'm at, but I was walking down one of these hallways. And I saw a sign that said Colonial Church, a family on mission. A family on mission. Then I think about your circumstances. I think about where you are today as a church. I think about time. That we are on the clock for the kingdom. All right? And regardless of our current circumstances, regardless of what you may consider a problem, time of transition, let me challenge you in this. You are still a family on mission. I mean, the mission has not changed. The purpose is the advancement of the gospel to every man, woman, child in Wichita Falls has not changed. Right? We may be in a transition, but time is still critical. Leveraging our time as a church family is still critical. And in the middle of this, guess who's in control of every circumstance here at Colonial Church? God is. Jesus is your leader. That's the leader. Jesus is the leader of His church. Jesus is the leader of this community, and He is ultimately in control. And I want to caution you as a church family, caution this community of believers that let's not look too far and too quickly anticipating when we finally get a new pastor. Let's not look too quick to that. Let's rest. Let's rest in the moment. Let's wait patiently and let's ask the question, God, what are you doing in our church family? I guarantee when we lean into Christ in the time of transition, what will happen is in this church family, your love will abound. Your knowledge of God will grow. Your affections for God will grow. Your affections for others will grow. And the community around you, the community of every man, woman, child in Wichita Falls, what they will begin to see is they're at Colonial. Something's happening. They're in a time of transition, but their love is abounding. Their knowledge is growing. Their affections of God are growing. And we see demonstrated through our community the works of righteousness, of what is holy, what is pure, and a church that is still on mission because the mission is always the same, the advancement of the gospel, the advancement of the gospel. So don't be dismayed. Take courage. He who began a good work in Colonial Church will be faithful to complete it. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for this morning. We thank you for this day. And we pray, God, that we truly can understand the lessons of the Apostle Paul, that whether it's in our personal life right now, in our families, no matter what we're going through, the challenges, the unforeseen challenges that we may find ourselves in, the problems that seem to be bringing us into desperate situations, Lord, that we'll recognize that you are in charge, that there is a purpose and a vision in my life, that ultimately you're working out, and that I look towards eternity. I look towards the perfecter of my faith, Jesus Christ. And for us as a church family, that we recognize that you are ultimately in control. Jesus is the leader of Colonial Church. May we faithfully follow him to advance the gospel and be a family on mission, reducing the lostness of our community, reaching out into corners of this community that most people wouldn't. And Father, may we recognize that there is nobody, regardless of our circumstance, there is nobody that is too far away. Your arms are long enough to save. You can reach every corner. Give us that passion to be on mission with you. May we take encouragement and confidence in a passage that brought me encouragement during my journey, which is Psalms 118, that says, I shall live, I surely shall not die. I shall live and recount the deeds of the Lord. Though I've been dealt with severely, I shall live. Father, you are the life giver. May we lean into you in every desperate situation. May we reach for the rock that is higher than ourselves and cling to it, knowing that in the middle of our problems we can find joy and we won't waste our time. We can leverage it for the kingdom. And in your name, amen.